On this vote, the yeas are 167, the nays are 253. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is on the request for recorded vote on amendment number 15, printed in Part A, House Report 112-398, by the gentlewoman from Hawaii, Ms. Hanabusa, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 15, printed in Part A of House Report number 112-398, offered by Ms. Hanabusa of Hawaii.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Earlier this week, House leaders decided to split up the 5-year transportation bill debate into parts, the first part of which began yesterday is wrapping up today. That is this bill that would expand offshore oil and gas drilling, also domestic drilling, and approve the Keystone Pipeline. They are voting on a number of amendments that they debated earlier. This is Representative Hanabusa's amendment. She's from Hawaii, and her amendment proposes that it would require that offshore oil and gas leases contain specific safety requirements. It's a 2-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 189, the nays are 228. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is on the request for recorded vote on amendment number 16, printed in Part A of House Report 112-398 by the gentleman from Washington, Mr. Hastings, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 16, printed in Part A of House Report number 112-398, offered by Mr. Hastings of Washington.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a record vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
The third of 6 amendment votes on a bill that would expand oil and gas drilling. Doc Hastings, Republican of Washington, with an amendment that would change the National Environmental Policy Act to allow for expedited development of renewable energy projects on federal lands and waters. Well, late last night they agreed, and earlier today negotiators from the House and Senate signed off on a plan to extend the Social Security payroll tax cut through the end of the year, also expanding or extending long-term unemployment benefits and the cut in reimbursement rates to Medicare physicians. Daniel Newhouser of Roll Call tweets this afternoon that the payroll bill is on the Rules Committee website. A Saturday vote would be okay under the Pledge to America, he writes. Leadership still thinking about a Friday vote, though. He will join us tomorrow morning at the top of the Washington Journal at 7 a.m. Eastern. We'll hear an update on what's ahead tomorrow in the debate over the payroll tax cut, both in the House and the Senate. We'll also be joined tomorrow morning by Representative Peter Welch of Vermont, and at 8:15, Alan Simpson, former senator, former Wyoming senator, and co-chair of the Simpson-Bowles Commission, the Fiscal Responsibility and Reform Commission. He joins us tomorrow morning. All of that on Washington Journal, which is a shorter program as the House comes in tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern.
Vote. The yeas are 252, the nays.
Ms. Roybal Allard. Off aye on no for Ms. Roybal Allard.
On this vote, the yeas are 250, the nays are 171. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on Amendment 17, printed in Part A of House Report 112-398 by the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 17, printed in Part A of House Report number 112-398. Offered by Mr. Markey of Massachusetts.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Well, Massachusetts Democrat Ed Markey will get votes on both of his amendments. This one would expand an existing Arctic oil ban, export ban, to include natural gas. Another 2-minute vote. 2 more amendment votes will follow this. Well, one way or the other, in the 113th Congress next year, there will be a new representative from Massachusetts from the 4th Congressional District. Joseph Kennedy III today launching his campaign for the Massachusetts congressional seat now being held by retiring Representative Barney Frank. He made the announcement in a video on his website today before heading out on a campaign swing through the district. Joe Kennedy III is the son of former U.S. Representative Joseph Kennedy II and a grandson of the late Robert F. Kennedy.
Yeas are 167.
Ms. Capter. Ms. Capter voted aye. Mr. Garrett. Mr. Garrett votes no.
On this vote, the yeas are 168, the nays are 254. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 18, printed in Part A of House Report 112-398 by the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 18, printed in Part A of House Report number 112-398, offered by Mr. Markey of Massachusetts.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
House members yesterday began consideration of a bill that would expand offshore and domestic oil and gas drilling and approve the Keystone XL pipeline. It was part of the package of the surface transportation bill. House Republican leaders earlier this week deciding to split up the bill in an effort to overcome opposition to some of its provisions. They're wrapping up work here on the last couple of amendments. Roll call vote on this, and one more will follow. This is Representative Markey's amendment, which would require that companies holding leases which allow them to drill on public lands offshore without paying a royalty to renegotiate those leases prior to bidding on new leases. It's a 2-minute vote, and again, one more amendment vote after this.
Ayes are 183, the nays are 238. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on Amendment 19, printed in Part A of House Report 112-398 by the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Labrador, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 19, printed in Part A of House Report number 112-398, offered by Mr. Labrador of Idaho.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
And it'll be the last amendment vote. Representative Raul Labrador of Ohio has an amendment which would streamline the process for geothermal exploration on federal lands. 2-minute vote. We expect the Democrats to offer a motion to recommit, a last chance to change the bill, and final passage ahead as well.
Are 244, the nays are 177. The amendment is agreed to. There being no further amendments, under the rule, the committee rises.
Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union has had under consideration H.R. 3408 pursuant to House Resolution 547. I report the bill is amended by that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 3408. And pursuant to House Resolution 547, reports the bill as amended by that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Is a separate vote demanded on a further amendment report from the Committee of the Whole? If not, the Chair will put them in gross. The question is on the adoption of the amendments. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to set clear rules for the development of United States oil shale resources, to promote shale technology, research and development, and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentlelady opposed to the bill?
I am opposed.
Clerk will report the motion.
Ms. Castro of Florida moves to recommit the bill H.R. 3408 to the Committee on Natural Resources with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment. At the end of the following title, Miscellaneous Provisions, Section, Restriction on Permits and Leases for the Great Lakes and the Florida Everglades. No federal or state permit or lease shall be issued for new oil and gas slant, directional or offshore drilling in, under, or within 5 miles of any of the Great Lakes or the Florida Everglades.
House will come to order. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Republican leadership's transportation package is a dead end. It is being panned by businesses and Democrats and Republicans alike. And what we will vote on next is the Republicans' funding portion of the package. And it's a little bit different. See, there's a special story. In fact, it's a love story. The love story of the breathtaking display of affection of big oil by the Republican Party. The bill is a special Valentine, a love letter.
House will come to order. Gentlelady will
bill
suspend.
is a
House
love letter.
Gentlelady may continue.
The Republicans.
Gentleman from Illinois. Gentleman's correct. The House is not in order. The House will come to order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady can continue.
The bill is a special Valentine, a love letter of the Republicans' undying devotion to big oil. No others compare. The problem is that with the Republican congressional leaders' blind passion for big oil, they correspondingly demonstrate an animosity to American families and businesses. See, it's been less than 2 years since the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, and Republicans in Congress now propose to drill for oil just about anywhere. Have safety measures been adopted by this Congress? No. Do they recognize that there are special places across America that are not appropriate for oil drilling? Not really. For example, the bill would allow drilling right off of the beaches of Florida. Florida's tourism industry, meanwhile, employs more than 1 million people. Tourism and fishing are multi-billion-dollar industries. Drilling closer to our shores puts those jobs at risk. Yet that's what the Republicans propose here. And for what? The CBO says that if you drill off the coast of Florida, that will generate $100 million. $1 billion in industry and tourism and fishing, or $100 million. BP decimated the Gulf Coast and caused billions of dollars in damage to our economy and our environment. The disaster is estimated to have cost the state of Florida alone $2.2 billion and almost 40,000 jobs. The Republican love letter to big oil could be...
Generally suspend. Members will be reminded to not traffic the well when other members are speaking.
The Republican love letter to big...
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Republican love letter to big oil could be the kiss of death for small businesses, hotels, motels, shrimpers, fishermen, and families that rely on tourism, and that's just in the state of Florida. This bill puts too many jobs at risk in a misguided, love-struck attempt to allow big oil to drill just about anywhere, including unique and sensitive areas all across America. Republican leadership has made it abundantly clear they're willing to sell America to the highest bidder. Well, I'm here to say America is not for sale. Is nothing sacred in this country anymore? Is nothing off limits? How about Mount Vernon, George Washington's home? Would we drill there if big oil could make a few bucks? How about Gettysburg National Battlefield? I hear there may be some natural gas nearby. Why not check Grandma and Grandpa's backyard? You're already trying to take away their Medicare, so why stop there? There are places in America that are not for sale and should be protected. And my amendment provides a test. Here's the test.
The House will come to order.
I picked 2 special areas to put to the test in this Congress. My amendment will prevent drilling within 5 miles of any of the Great Lakes or the Everglades. Now, don't get me wrong, we must have robust domestic oil production. In fact, that is happening now. We are currently producing in America at higher levels than ever before. We have more domestic production than we import. Last year, U.S. crude oil production reached its highest level since 2003, and the Obama administration has offered and continues to offer millions of acres of public lands and federal waters for oil and gas exploration and production. In 2010, the Department of Interior offered 37 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico for oil and gas exploration, but the oil companies have only tapped 2.4. So why are we going to open up even more public lands for drilling when we haven't even used 1/15 of what's available? It's a love story. It's a love story. Last year, although Exxon made $41 billion, BP made over $25 billion, the Republicans saw to it that American taxpayers chipped in another $10 billion from 2002 to 2008. Well, enough is enough. We're not going to turn the Great Lakes into the OK Lakes, and we're not going to turn the Everglades into the Neverglades. The Great Lakes and Everglades are not just environmental treasures, they are the lifeblood of our local economies. The Great Lakes and Everglades employ many Americans who work in tourism, lodging, fishing, and ecological industries. I urge my colleagues not to play an enabling role in this tawdry love affair between most Republicans in Congress and big oil. Vote yes on this motion and pledge your devotion to our great nation rather than big oil. I yield back the balance of my time.
Purpose is the gentleman from Washington seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the motion to recommit.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is one more example where the other side is playing politics with American energy and American job creation. At a time, Mr. Speaker, when Iran is threatening global energy meltdown, the Middle East is undergoing numerous uprisings, China's thirst for oil is growing, and our consumers are facing rising prices at the pump, it's time to secure our own future with American-made energy. The other side talks about energy security. This legislation, the underlying legislation, offers real opportunity to expand our domestic energy production and secure our security. The other side talks about federal revenue. This legislation would bring in billions of dollars to the federal and state governments and bring tens of billions of dollars in investment into this country. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, while the other side talks about creating jobs for Americans, this legislation will create hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs for American workers. And while the other side cheapens these jobs by calling them temporary, we call these jobs what they really are, American jobs. The underlying legislation sets out a common-sense action plan to secure our future, create jobs, and increase federal revenue and investment in this country. Oppose this motion to recommit and vote no and vote yes on the underlying legislation. I yield back my time.
Without objection, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion to recommit. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. The noes have it, and the motion is not adopted.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady from Florida.
I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of the Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on the motion to recommit will be followed by 5-minute votes on passage of the bill if ordered and approval of the journal if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote.
The underlying bill, H.R. 3408, would expand offshore and domestic oil and gas drilling and approve the Keystone XL pipeline. Democratic Representative Castor of Florida has offered a motion to recommit, a last chance to change the bill before final passage. Her motion would prohibit oil drilling within 5 miles of the Great Lakes or the Everglades. This is a 15-minute vote. Final passage is next. President Obama Monday introduced the fiscal year 2013 federal budget proposal, and today Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner called on Congress to keep working together following an apparent agreement on extending the payroll tax cut. He also defended the president's budget request. He testified today before the House Budget Committee. During this vote, we're going to bring you his opening remarks.
Member Van Hollen and members of the committee, thanks for giving me the chance to come talk to you today about these important questions. I'm going to talk about 4 things, just briefly about the economy and the challenges we face there, then a bit on the near-term imperatives on growth and jobs. I'll lay out the broad elements of our strategy, and then I'll talk about the contrast between us where we disagree. I'll give our version of where we disagree. First, in the economy. The economy today is gradually getting stronger, but we have a lot of tough work still ahead of us. Over the past 2.5 years, despite the financial headwinds from the crisis as people bring down debt and we work through the housing construction bubble, despite the severe cutbacks by state and local governments, despite the crisis in Europe, despite the rise in oil prices last spring, despite the terrible damage to confidence caused by the specter of default this summer, despite all those shocks and headwinds, the economy has grown at an average annual rate of 2.5% since growth resumed in the summer of 2009. Private employers have added 3.7 million jobs over the past 23 months. Private investment in equipment and software is up by more than 30%. Productivity has improved. Exports across the American economy, from agriculture to manufacturing, are expanding rapidly. Americans are saving more and bringing down their debt levels. The financial sector is in much stronger shape, helping to meet the growing demands for credit and capital. Now, these improvements are signs of the underlying resilience of our economy, the resourcefulness of American workers and businesses, and they're signs of the importance of the swift and forceful actions we took with the Fed to stabilize the financial system and to pull the economy out of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. But we still face very significant economic challenges, particularly for the average working family in this country. Americans are still living with the acute damage caused by the crisis. The unemployment rate is still very high. Millions of Americans are living in poverty, still looking for work, suffering from the fall in the value of their homes, or struggling to save for retirement or pay for college. And for these reasons, the President's budget calls for substantial additional support for economic growth and job creation alongside longer-term reforms to improve economic opportunity, improve long-term growth prospects, and restore fiscal sustainability. I want to applaud the congressional leadership for the progress they've achieved. They've reached on agreement to extend the payroll tax cut and emergency unemployment insurance, and this is my second point. Don't stop there. There are more things that we can do with bipartisan support, things that have traditionally had bipartisan support, that would be good to make the economy stronger in the short term. And just because we disagree now on the long-term shape of tax reform and entitlement reform doesn't have to get in the way of doing more things now that would help the economy in the short term. I'll just give you 3 examples. More help to get construction workers back on the job with substantial infrastructure program would be good policy. Helping Americans refinance to take advantage of lower mortgage rates would be good policy. And better incentives for investing in the United States would be good policy. All those things are things that have had broad bipartisan support in the past, and we shouldn't let the big disagreements we have on the ultimate shape of tax reform and entitlement reform get in the way of movement on those things now. So don't stop with the payroll tax extension. Now, beyond these immediate steps, and this is my third point, the President's budget lays out a long-term strategy to strengthen economic growth and improve economic opportunity while reducing our deficits to more sustainable levels. I know the conventional wisdom here in Washington is that this debate does not matter because Congress is too divided to legislate in this election year. But this is a very important debate. It matters because it's about fundamental economic priorities, how to increase growth and opportunity, how to strengthen health care and retirement security, how to reform our tax system, how we return to living within our means. We have to govern with limited resources, and we have to make choices about how to use those resources more wisely, particularly given the millions and millions of Americans who will become eligible over the coming decades for Medicare and Social Security. And it's important because, as you all know, at the end of this year, we face the expiry of the Bush tax cuts and the possible imposition of the sequester, and together that will force us to come to agreement on another substantial down payment on fiscal reform. So it's some debate we have to have now, and we need to get work on how to build consensus on how to move forward in this case, even though we're so far apart in some of the fundamental choices. Now, in the President's budget, we proposed reforms that would save $4 trillion over 10 years, $3 trillion on top of the caps on discretionary spending we agreed to in August. Now, if Congress were to enact these reforms, they would lower the deficit from just under 9% of GDP in 2011 to just under 3% of GDP in 2018. That would stabilize the overall debt burden as the share of the economy in the second half of the decade. That would put us back on the path towards fiscal sustainability and leave us much better positioned to confront the remaining challenges we face, and they are formidable still, that build in future decades as more Americans retire. Now, under this plan, discretionary spending is projected to fall to its lowest level as a share of the economy since Dwight Eisenhower was president. And the President's proposal would also slow the rate of growth of spending in Medicare and Medicaid, both through the Affordable Care Act reforms and the additional proposals we've laid on the budget for additional Medicare and Medicaid savings. But as we reduce spending, we also have to protect investments that are important to expanding future economic growth. And that's why the budget makes a series of targeted investment proposals in education, in innovation, in manufacturing, and infrastructure. These are not expensive proposals. There's things we can afford, and we propose to pay for them within a framework that reduces our deficits to more sustainable levels. Now, in order to achieve this balance between significant, substantial deficit reduction over time with still some room for investments that matter, we're proposing to raise a modest amount of additional revenues through tax reform. The President's plan proposes roughly $2.5 in spending cuts for every dollar of revenue increases. These revenue increases would fall only on the top 2% of Americans, not on the rest of the 98% of Americans. They would raise revenues by roughly 1% of GDP, although slightly less than the proposals in the Simpson-Bowles Commission. And focusing these revenue proposals on the top 2% is, in our judgment, a more fair and a better way to achieve fiscal sustainability, better for the economy and better than the impact of an equivalent amount of cuts in things like benefits to middle-income seniors or into infrastructure, even defense spending. We propose tax reforms that raise revenues not because we think it's good politics for us or that any of us like to do it. We propose it because we do not believe it is possible to meet our national security needs, to preserve a basic level of health care and retirement security, to compete effectively in the global economy without some increase in revenues as part of a balanced plan. Now, we illustrate in the budget a range of specific tax changes that could be added onto the present tax system to raise the necessary amount of revenue. But we think the best approach to get there would be through comprehensive tax reform. We've outlined a general set of principles that would be designed to make the system more fair, more simple, better at encouraging investment in the United States. We're going to lay out in the coming weeks a broad framework for corporate tax reform designed to achieve that objective: more simple, more fair, lower rates, broad and base, better for investment in the United States. And we think that's a good place to start. And I hope, as the Chairman said at the beginning, there's the prospect of bipartisan consensus on a framework of tax reform like that. Final point. I know there are members of Congress who are critical of these proposals and would prefer a different strategy, and you should judge our plan against those alternatives. Let me say where we agree and I think where we disagree. Where we agree is that our fiscal deficits are unsustainable. They have to be brought down over time and will do a lot of damage to economic growth in this country. And we agree that the commitments we made in Medicare and Medicaid are unsustainable, unaffordable over the long run. But we disagree in some fundamental respects. Some of you have suggested that we cut deeper and faster with more severe austerity now. In our judgment, that would damage economic growth. It would reverse the gains we've achieved in getting more Americans back to work, and it would put more Americans into poverty. A program of severe, immediate austerity now is not a growth strategy. We can't cut our way to economic growth, and you have to be very attentive to an economy still healing from the crisis to make sure we're doing things that help growth and not hurt growth in the short run. Second, probably more fundamental contrast between our two plans is that there are some on your side who have suggested we try to restore fiscal balance without raising any additional revenue from anyone, or even by cutting taxes further. Now, in our judgment, to do so would necessarily entail deep cuts in benefits for retirees and low-income Americans, cuts in investments in education and innovation that would hurt growth, and cuts in defense spending that would damage our national security interests. So the choice we face is not about whether we should reduce our deficits, because we all know we have to do that. It's about how fast we do it, how quickly we do it, but fundamentally it's about whether to do it with a balanced plan that helps growth in the short run and the long run, or with a plan that will place more of the burden on cuts in national security, Medicare, low-income programs, education, innovation, infrastructure in ways that we think would be unfair and damaging to our interests as a country. Now, these are tough reforms, but it's a balanced mix of spending cuts and tax increases. It gives us room to make investments that will improve opportunities for Americans. It will help protect our basic commitment to retirement security and health care for the elderly and the poor. It provides substantial, immediate, additional help for the average American, alongside reforms to help restore long-term sustainability. It's not going to solve all our challenges. Even if you embrace these proposals today, we'd still be left with substantial additional challenges, but it would put us in a much better position to meet those challenges. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to try to respond to your questions.
You'll find all of that hearing online in our video library at cspan.org. Lots more, too, with the hearings this week we've covered on the fiscal year 2013 budget proposal. On the House floor, they're voting on a Democratic motion to recommit made by Representative Castor of Florida, which would prohibit any federal or state permits or leases from being issued for offshore drilling within 5 miles of any of the Great Lakes or Florida Everglades. The next vote will be the final passage bill on a bill that expands domestic and offshore oil and gas drilling and approves the Keystone XL pipeline.
On this vote, the yeas are 176, the nays are 241. The motion is not adopted. The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The legislation is adopted. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
On that, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested by the gentleman from Massachusetts. Those favoring recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
And this is final passage on H.R. 3408. This is a bill that would expand oil and gas drilling, and it would also approve the Keystone XL pipeline. This is part of the surface transportation debate. House leaders earlier this week made the decision to split up the transportation bill into several parts to overcome opposition to some of the provisions in the bill. And House members began working on this part of it yesterday. it is likely that they won't finish the transportation bill until they return from the President's Day recess. They will gavel out tomorrow and head into a recess after tomorrow's session. They come in tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern, and they are likely at some point tomorrow to take up the conference report, the agreement on conferees on the extension of the payroll tax cut. And our Capitol Hill producer Andy Ten reports that the Rules Committee, House Rules Committee, will hold an emergency meeting this evening in about 25 minutes at 6:40 Eastern. So that means that they're working on a rule for consideration at some point tomorrow in the House, and it will also come up in the Senate as well. Again, the House gavels in tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Eastern.
On this vote, the yeas are 237, the nays are 187. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal, which the Chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The Journal stands approved. The Chair lays before the House sundry communications.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, I hereby respectfully submit my resignation from the Committee on Homeland Security effective today, February 16, 2012. I have accepted an assignment to the House Armed Services Committee. If you and your staff should have any questions or concerned, please feel free to contact me. Signed sincerely, Jackie Spear, Member of Congress. The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, I resign my position on the House Committee on the Budget effective today, Thursday, February 16, 2012. Signed sincerely, Paul D. Tonko, Member of Congress. The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, this is to notify you formally pursuant to Rule 8 of the Rules of the House of Representatives that I have been served with a subpoena issued by the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York to produce documents in a criminal case. After consultation with the Office of General Counsel, I have determined that compliance with the subpoena is inconsistent with the precedents and privileges of the House. Signed sincerely, John D. Dingell, Member of Congress.
Without objection, the resignations are accepted. For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut rise?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Democratic Caucus, I offer a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 553. Resolved that the following named members be and are hereby elected to the following standing committees of the House of Representatives. 1. Committee on Armed Services, Ms. Spear. 2. Committee on the Budget, Ms. Bonamici. 3. Committee on Natural Resources, Mr. Tonko. 4. Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, Ms. Bonamici.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be considered as read and printed in the record.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. What's that? The House will be in order. Oh, thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana rise? Without objection, recognized. Gentleman will suspend. Members will please take their conversations off the floor.